Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Film Exiles podcast. This is the inaugural maiden voyage of what we hope is a new series on the platform. This will be the video game exiles, or the game exiles, if you might. And the idea was birthed by Brandon, who is joining us today. Welcome, Brandon.
Glad to be here.
And joining us as well is Christian.
Glad to be here as well, man.
All right. And I am yours truly, Lupe. Today we will be reviewing in full, complete spoiler detail The Last of Us 2. It's been out for a couple weeks, and we have a spoiler-free review from Brandon on the channel. So if you'd like to hear our spoiler-free thoughts on it, please head over there. But if you want a detailed, deep dive analysis discussing every single aspect of the game, then this is the place for you. So your spoiler warning has been issued, and we're just going to get right into it. So guys, first off, I want to hear about your history with the Last of Us franchise. Coming into this sequel, what is your past experience with the franchise? And we'll start with Christian.
Well, definitely played the first one on the PS3 and loved that game. And it was so awesome with the relationship. You start to learn who Ellie is. You learn about the lore of this post-apocalyptic world and the fungus infection and everything. And it had so much to say about humanity, so much to say about relationships. And it felt so real. The story was deep, cared about the characters. And then, of course, the relationship between Joel and Ellie and bringing him back to humanity, that brutal ending. It's a difficult game to compare to. I played the HD remaster on PS4, and I have it downloaded on my PlayStation 4. Made me fall in love with the game all over again. So my hype level for part 2 was at an all-time high when this was released, man. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed Last of Us 1 and then the remaster as well.
Nice. Brandon, what about you?
Same. I was always a big Uncharted fan, so as soon as this got announced, I was pretty excited for the first game, just seeing the world that it was going to and the way they were doing their survival. So I got it on day one, and 20 minutes into the game, I was gripped and in tears. And I'd never had a game that just launched right into trying to break you down as a person. Played it, absolutely loved it all the way through. Loved the questions that it posed at the end. And like Christian, got the Last of Us remastered in 4K because I have it on the Pro. And
Sweet.
It's fantastic. And then played the DLC actually just recently. I for some reason I never got around to the DLC on it, and it's actually quite good as well.
It's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, for me, I'm just the same. Played the first on PS3. I never revisited it because that's just the way I am. Usually when I play or watch something, it's very rare that I revisit things. I like to discover new things because I feel like I might be missing out on a new thing that's like The Last of Us if I'm spending time on The Last of Us. So it just stayed in my memory, left a very, very huge impression on me. It's one of the most cinematic video games ever in terms of like storytelling, and it's very mature and complex. And I don't just mean in terms of being brutal and bloody and that kind of thing, just being complex and not basic in its storytelling, asking very difficult questions of its characters, putting them in very difficult, conflicting situations where there is like no right answer. And I really like that kind of mature storytelling, not just your simple A to B to C, generic and then happily ever after. So I really appreciated The Last of Us for that. And I think it really changed the way video game developers make games. There was more focus on actually directing a cinematic video game, and we felt that influence ever since then. So we've all been looking forward to, The Last of Us Part 2. So it was a long journey from The Last of Us 1 to the sequel, and with time, a lot of things happened. The wait was about 7 years, if I'm correct, and expectations built. There were several delays, and when they got to the finish line, like, oh, finally, it seems we're gonna get it, like, in a couple weeks or whatever. It was as if when it rains, it pours. There was a storm. There were leaks. There were rumors. It was just a whole bunch of controversy. So that even made going into the game a more intense experience. So, guys, in terms of your expectations going in right before you played it, how did you feel, especially in light of the fact that it was delayed for so long? How did you feel about that? There were leaks. Did you get exposed to those leaks and those rumors? And if so, how did that make you feel about the game? Let's start with Christian.
I know you and I talked about this, I think, with Paul on ENN. The delays were killing me. I was so hyped for this game. And I don't always purchase a game brand new. Sometimes I wait a little bit. They're very expensive at the beginning and stuff. It just comes down to, sometimes financial decisions. But this was definitely one of those games that was like, I'm buying it day one. There's no questions asked. I'm buying it day one. I'm going to pre-order it if anything comes with it. I did that with Fallen Order and a couple of others. And the delays were just, oh God, it was just, first world problem, I know. But it was just like, oh my God, come on. I just want this game to come out. I did stay away from the majority of the leaks. I caught a couple of them before they came out, but like we talked about on that episode, I purposely tried to shut it down when I saw things. The only thing, and then I'll throw it to Brandon because I don't want to take up his time. The only thing that disappointed me was I couldn't stay away from the arguments and the conversation that was happening online. And I think that partially disappointed me. And it didn't take away my hype, but it almost, I guess it did. I guess it did take a little bit of the hype away because I was like so disappointed in this fight. And I was like, I don't want to concentrate on the fight. I want to just concentrate on this game. Yeah. And it was so hard to do that because of that conversation that was happening, but I was still hyped though. I couldn't help it. It was still there.
Sure. Yeah. Brandon, what about you?
So obviously hyped. Delays are always an annoyance. But when it comes to Naughty Dog, I know it's for a reason. They're that one developer that I know for a fact. If it's delayed, it's because it's not perfect yet. And I'm fine with that. As far as the leaks go, I didn't hear a single thing. I saw people trying to spoil it on Twitter. And I shut it down as often as possible. I threatened to block people. I did block people. I don't read Reddit. I did not want to know a single detail about this game that was not in a trailer. So I went in with a completely clean slate, and I did not let anybody's poor opinions try to make up mine for me. And that's how I treat all media anymore. Movies, TV, I don't care. I don't want to know. I want to experience it the way the creator wants me to experience it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm pretty much on the same page with you guys. Apart from, I delved into the spoils a little bit more than you guys. So, for example, I knew that Joelle was killed pretty early in the game. I also heard, the rumors about transgender characters and lesbian relationships and, the whole controversy that was, bubbling up. And then I think what I was more concerned with were the accusations of the studio not treating their workers well. And there was some labor controversy. It's funny. I was at a friend's house, having a couple of drinks. We were having an evening with all our people, and I was like, oh, The Last of Us 2 is coming out, and he was like, oh, don't play it, and so those things are always very weird to me in terms of people not having the full context of things they've heard, but already forming opinions and having this agenda to make something fail even before they've seen it. So my verdict on the whole thing, and with media in general, is this: is that I can hear rumors, I can hear accusations, but I need to play the game or experience it to put things in context, because everything was loosey goosey, and as you guys said, Reddit rumors, you can't rely on a lot of those. It was a very unstable kind of environment, so I wasn't sure whether what I was hearing was the truth or whether it was agenda driven narrative. So I needed to play the game to put things in context and see what was true and what was not. So going in, I was very excited, but I was a bit cautious because of what I had heard. But I was going to let the game speak for itself. That was my mindset going into it. So with the table being set, a little bit of background being made known, guys, what are your general thoughts of the game? Give us thumbs up or thumbs down. Christian, let's start with you. Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Last of Us 2?
Two very enthusiastic thumbs
Okay.
up.
Okay.
Yeah, not quite as good as the first, but yeah, two enthusiastic thumbs up.
Okay. And Brandon, what about you?
Masterpiece, 100%.
Okay.
I'll cut this one short. Masterpiece, perfect.
All right. Same. I agree with you guys. 2 thumbs up, and then my big toes also up. Masterpiece. It's almost flawless, apart from maybe a couple nitpicks, and we'll talk about that. All right, so let's talk about some technical things, and then later we'll dive into the story and the things that actually make The Last of Us The Last of Us. So in terms of gameplay mechanics, it's a game after all, right? We love it for the story, but let's not forget it's a video game. So Christian, let's start with you. Just on gameplay alone, what do you think of the gameplay mechanics? Were there any new evolutionary or growth aspects to the gameplay that you enjoyed, or was there anything that you did not? What's your take on that?
So this is where I have some of if I had to put a couple of thumbs down, this is probably where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I loved what they improved on. Briefly, I think that they improved especially on the stealth from the original game. Ellie has grown. She's a 19-year-old woman now, not a 14-year-old girl. And she is brutal in her moves. I mean, she's like Metal Gear Solid stealth at this point.
Yeah.
And she's incredible. And the way she can listen through walls and everything, it's just, she's in some ways it's very like overpowered, and even Abby can be with how brutal she is. But it's still, man, it's such an improvement over the first game. However, I do have some issues with some of the controls are wonky. When you're jumping from a rock to another rock, if you don't time the jump perfectly, it's not quite right. Trying to find jumping onto a rope, sometimes they'll slip off. You use the controller to look up, and the graphics break apart just a little bit. You dodge, and then all of a sudden the dodge doesn't work the second time, or if they move the wrong way. It just, certain things didn't quite work the way you wanted them to, but that's video games. I just got through playing the brand new Tomb Raider series, and the controls on that game are fantastic, but they're wonky at times. That's the lack of a better word. So still, to me, I'm going to throw it out there, it did not take away from the game at all. If anything, it upped the tension at times. It actually made the tension even worse.
Unpredictability.
So it was like real life, because real life would be unpredictable, right? So and I like the fact that it didn't like point you in the direction all the time of where you had to go. You had to figure out the mechanics, throwing a rope over a window or something like that. So that was cool, but it just suffered a couple of times. It's video games, man. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I get it. Brandon, what about you?
I resemble exactly what he said. Other than a lot of those little quirks I didn't run into as often. Nothing that broke any of the immersion. If anything, I always just kind of looked at it as, you're not a soldier, you're not a trained killer, you're just a person. You're just a 19-year-old girl running around. So when things don't work out perfectly, it's because that's fucking life. So that's always how I kind of approach the situation. You're not perfect because the character's not perfect. I tried to mix the gameplay as part of the story and part of the structure. And like you said, the gameplay really, really feeds into the tension of the game, and which feeds into the story and how you were supposed to feel. So as far as the mechanics go, borderline perfect, but not 100% exact.
Yeah. Personally, I felt that the gameplay and with the stealth mechanics and with the way that the characters react to your presence and the way that different factions react to your presence. So, for example, the WLF and their dogs, the way that they react to you is different from the way that the Seraphites would react to you, and it's different from the way that the infected will react to you. I like that variation. However, the things I'll say are downsides are that, like Kristen alluded to, sometimes it was like Ellie was a superhero. Like, you're just a little like, teenager, because she is. I mean, she's an adolescent or an adult, I guess, and she's taking down like entire hordes, But it's a game, obviously. But that always that made me laugh a little bit. And then sometimes it got a little bit repetitive. I found myself playing some sections of the game just to get to more of the story. And then one thing that I actually did like a lot, like the upgrades of the weapons. I absolutely love customizing the weapons. And I love the fact that, you'll go to the upgrade benches, the work benches, and they actually had actual animations, and they would show you actually like adding something to the weapon. That's a tiny detail. Doesn't seem like a big thing, but it really helped with the immersion and just making it more cinematic and more real. So
and the sound effects, by the way, the guns were fantastic when they're upgrading
absolutely.
them. So good.
The sound design of the entire thing mixed in with the musical score.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was so tense. So tense. And from there, we can segue well into the musical score, because one thing about The Last of Us is that the musical score buttresses and, supports the storytelling and the gameplay and the immersion. And The Last of Us, the first one, was very well known for its musical score. It has an absolutely stunning, breathtaking musical score that was composed by Gustavo Santaolalla. And this one, what do you guys think? Is it an upgrade, on the same level, a continuation? What was your take on the music in this one? Let's start with Kristen.
The score in this is great, and it definitely enhances the immersion into this world. But I'm actually going to leave the score to you and Brandon, because I wanted to take it just from a little bit of a different side, and from a musician's approach to it. You guys know how much I love playing guitar, how much I love singing, and to me, that's more than just playing a song. When you write a song, or you're singing even somebody else's song, you're covering a song. Usually for me, music helped me so much after my mom died of cancer, and it helped me through so many things. I have depression and everything, and music can bring me back. It really can. When I'm in a dark place, picking up my guitar and playing a stupid G, D, C progression can just make me feel so much better. And the guitar was such a huge symbol in this game. It was so much to Ellie. And when she lost her fingers at the end, I died a little. I was like, she can't fucking play guitar. I was dying. It was that scene with her and Gina. She sings Take On Me, and her voice is cracking during the perfect part of the lyrics when she's thinking about Joel. Music is such an important part of this game, not just the score. It helps with the story. And I was so touched that this game decided to go that route, because there are not many games that do that. Yeah. And music was everything in this game. It wasn't just the music was part of it. It was like just part of the world. And it was so good to see too that music continued in a post-apocalyptic world as well. Oh man, I loved it. Loved it.
I really love that take. We'll discuss more about Ellie losing her fingers as we talk about story and some symbolic and thematic elements. Brandon, musical score. What's your take?
So on the score, it's hard to compare to the first one. The Gustavo parts they don't have as much heart as the first one did, but it's a different kind of story. because Ellie and Joel's relationship is so strained. Everybody's relationships in this is strained, so you don't have as much love in the music. And I thought that came through, that there's a want for love in it, that I think it's there in the music intentionally, but that it is strained. It's never as powerful as the first one. But the real addition on this one was Matt Quayle, and he adds all the intensity, especially to all the action scenes and the high point moments. And without that music, I mean, your heart's just beating out of your chest in this, and you are terrified at any moment when the music is playing. And it works into the narrative and the gameplay and everything beautifully. And then you have the musical layer on top of it, like Christian said, where you've got the actual music, you've got actual Pearl Jam songs, you've got a guitar that you can literally play, and I've watched people play Metallica on it. But then you take a song like Pearl Jam and just the first part of the lyrics and how they spell out the motivations of the characters and how that goes through the whole thing. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. But for me, I have a bit of a different take, and just briefly, I think that when you talk of things I didn't like as much, I think that the musical score, I don't want to say thumbs down because it's still good, but the musical score for The Last of Us, the first one, is so good. It's like really one of the best scores of anything, period. Let's not even just, keep it within the realm of video games. It's so good. I have it, on all my devices, ready to play all the time. And I played, like, the years since the video game came out, I've been playing it. I feel like the musical score for this one isn't as good. However, as Brandon correctly said, the new edition, McQuail is his name. He in terms of the score for elevating tension and just having, like, the sound, sort of more of a soundscape, I would say, he added to that. So that is good. And then, as Christian said, the symbolism of music within the story, in terms of there being a guitar, a song, Joelle having taught her how, given her the guitar and taught her how to play, and that connection that they have, that's a plus. So you have 1 thumbs down and 2 thumbs up. Overall, I'll say on an even scale, because to me, the musical score from Gustavo is so important for the first one. And I kind of felt a little bit let down that I didn't feel the exact same passion about this musical score. So that's my take on it. Now let's move on to the graphics and the cinematography. After all, it's a video game, so the video part of it is very important. It's important for the immersion, for how cinematic it is. Christian, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you did allude earlier a little bit to, when you're trying to look somewhere, there was some jarring transitions, so what was your entire experience with the graphics and cinematography?
Well, as our resident photographer, I'll definitely let Brandon go deeper into that, because he did such a great job with the photography mode. And it should be noted that I do not have a Pro. I have a PS4, so I don't have the Pro. So it is possible that some of the little issues that I felt, especially when things were going nuts on the screen, and there were either a bunch of infected coming at you, or you made a mistake and the Seraphites heard you, and all of a sudden you got to fight a bunch of them off, and it gets a little wonky, could be a PS4 versus a PS4 Pro thing. That's definitely possible. Taking those aside, which occasionally did take me out of the game, like I said, jumping on a rope and she doesn't grab it, it's like, come on. Occasionally from those little things happening, oh my God, like when you first enter Seattle and you're on the horseback and you're looking around, what the hell? Like, you felt like you're in a post-apocalyptic Seattle. And then I think Brandon was the one that sent me a video. A guy on YouTube compared real Seattle to post-apocalyptic Seattle. And it was like, oh, wow, we're looking at the exact same thing. They painstakingly recreated areas of the United States so well. And there were certain scenes, especially when you're talking about cinematography, like when you were sneaking around the Seraphites and the water's rushing through and you're in a parking garage and you need to jump from one level to the next. Man, that was so well designed. It was so well designed. So the level design and everything like that, I think, was done really well, very immersive.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, to me, the only downside is when those little mechanical things, because the world looks so good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why it was so jarring when that happened. But yeah, there's not much more I can say about it without ruining you two. So go ahead.
All right. Brandon, if anyone who follows you on Twitter has seen how enthusiastic you've been about the look of the game, what do you have to say about
I
that?
Yeah, I do have it on PS4 Pro, so it runs at 2K resolution instead of 1080p, and just the level of detail is beyond incredible. The foliage, the destruction, the trees growing, the mist, the rain, every little detail is just mind blowing in the game, and it makes it like playing a movie. It every single moment of that game is meant to make you look like you were watching a movie.
Mm.
So just stunningly gorgeous in the cinematics when it's not in the cinematics. But the key difference is you're not watching a pre-rendered movie. You're watching it play out in real time. And then when the cinematic is over, it moves back over your shoulder and you take over and you're like, holy shit, I was just in a cutscene and now I'm playing that. And it looks almost as good, if not exactly the same. And I probably spent 10-20% of my runtime just playing with the camera mode and just trying to get the best looking shots I could. And even now I'm on my third playthrough and I'm finding new ways to play with the camera and get just mind blowing images out of it. And I can't wait to see what it looks like running on a next gen console because I can't imagine how much better it could look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't really have anything more to add. Completely agree with you guys. One of the best looking games. I think a lot of the delays would definitely have had to do with how much insane detail is in the game. I really like the diversity of environments, although it's not the most diverse because you're in Midwestern and Northwestern America. I really liked scenes that stand out to me. When you first encounter the Seraphites, you're in a lot of like green brushery and you're like crawling under leaves and it's raining at the same time. Then also when Ellie is when they're taking the shortcut that the Seraphites made and they have to climb into the clouds.
Oh, dude,
That
scary.
is freaking like the cinematography and the way that they're able to capture the feeling of like vertigo and like I'm not the best with heights. I can't say it's like a huge fear of mine, but I'm not the best with heights. And I felt I felt Abby's fear of heights. And then also when you're escaping the Seraphites Island, going through all the fire and all that stuff, those three parts really, really stood out to me. Obviously the fire, because there's a lot of lighting that they have to do. And it was done so well. So I completely agree with you guys. If anyone's listening to this and, wants a game that looks good, this, based on that alone, The Last of Us 2 wins. So going on from cinematography and graphics to the story in general, let's get just really brief thoughts of what you think of the story in general, because we're going to do a deep dive. So I just want to get a sentence or two of what you think of the story, and how you like it. So Christian, let's start with you.
Briefly, and like you said, I know there's a lot of discussion online about this and everything. I actually found it to be a very natural continuation of the first game, and I really liked, especially when she was running around Jackson at the beginning. Yeah, I really felt growing that world and everything, and then of course what happened. We'll get into the plot points later. It just felt like a natural continuation of what happened, because the consequences of that continue. Of all the decisions made in the first game continue. So yeah, to me it felt like it was very natural and organic.
Okay. Brandon, what do you think?
I was kind of blown away by where it went. I did think it was the natural progression, but I don't think it was the progression people expected. They
Oh yeah, I
wanted
don't want you to think I wasn't
yeah
surprised, by the way.
no,
But yeah, it was,
which
but it did
I
seem
love that
natural. Yeah.
they answered the question on the questions that they asked at the end of the first game, and they didn't just be like, well, we'll just go on another road trip and people will love this. They said, no, let's show that there's choice and that there's consequences for your choices, whether they're good or bad. And in this game, they showed that your choices can haunt you, and they showed that there is no, not necessarily a right or a wrong. There is no villain in this except maybe for yourself, and the PTSD and the monsters that you make.
All right,
And
save that. Please don't give it all away. We're gonna
it's
get into the themes, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the themes of this. I would say that for the story, I came in quite skeptical because of the things I had heard and the changes that they had made. Because in a lot of media, sometimes it can be something where it's forced. And I mean, this is spoiler free, so we can talk about the fact that in terms of having LGBTQ representation, having Joelle, who was the male lead, completely erased from the story earlier on, but it acquitted itself. That's what I'll say briefly, and then now let's get more into details. So let's start with the controversy and the extreme reactions to the story. Guys, what is your take on it? Come at it from all angles. Remember, we're the Film Exiles, so feel free to go deep into it. You can't be canceled. You've already been exiled. Let's start with Christian.
So I'll stay away from themes and everything for this answer, but I hate leaks, man. I hate them. They allow a narrative to get created by the leakers ahead of time, and they control it from the moment they hit the ground. Now, you talked about it a little at the beginning. There could have been some issues where people at work were treated like crap, and I think that needs to be addressed. But from the beginning, when this thing hit, before it hit, because of the controversy, this sucker was like the Last Jedi of video games, you know? And take that for what it is. I love Last Jedi. Brandon right here doesn't. And it's not a big deal. Who cares? But it's simply the most controversial of the series. People love it and fight for it vehemently, or they hate it and trash it constantly. There's no in between. Zero. And it's the same here. And there are definitely people who never played this freaking game before, and they're trashing it based on a narrative that's coming out there. Just like I'm sure there's people that never watched Star Wars before and are trashing it based on that. And they just joined the hate train. And that's what really bothered me the most, is that this stuff was getting built up, even by some of my friends online that were taking and running with it. And I was like, guys, did you even like play the game yet? No, but I read the leaks and the leaks sucked. Well, how do you know? You got to play it. So, and you got to try to keep an open mind when you play it too, and not convince yourself that the game's going to be shit before you even boot up your PS4 or PS4 Pro. So that was for me. I'll let you guys take it from there. That's where I had my problem and why the leaks bothered me so much, because of what got built up before this game even got off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. It's depressing. All right, Brandon. Give us your take on the controversy and extreme reactions.
So I like Christian. I absolutely hate leaks. You're getting a very, very small, narrow image of a 30-hour long game, and you're making up your entire mind without any context, without any of the heart, without any of the soul, without any of the story. And you're pretending that these creators hated the character and that they hate their fans and they're trying to shit on you, when in reality, Troy Baker and Neil Druckmann love these characters more than we do. I guarantee you, and it was probably heartbreaking to kill Joel the way they did. But when you play it in the game, I've never had a game put me in the shoes of the character like this. And you were supposed to hate that Joel was beaten to death with a golf club. 100% you were supposed to hate that, because the character you're going to play for the next 12 hours is supposed to hate that. But people don't get that. When you just watch a playthrough, you're not getting it. I've even had discussions with people and they're like, oh, I hated this, and this. Here's the video. It's like, did you play the game? They're like, no, I watched a playthrough. That's not the same.
Not close.
You can't watch somebody play it give their reaction, and then you come in and repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially 5 million people watching PewDiePie play this game, who is a known bigot. He has said bigot things on YouTube. You think he's not going to be pissed every time a gay character pops up on screen?
Right.
Whereas me, I don't see gay characters. I see characters. Mm-hmm. That's all I cared about. But you go to Metacritic and everybody's like, keep this fag shit out of my game. It's like, what is wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
ridiculous.
If you give the game's gorgeous, I don't like this trans bullshit in my game. That's not a 0. If you think the game is gorgeous but you don't like the subject matter, that's at least a 5. If you give it a 0,
mm-hmm.
you didn't play it and you're just being a hateful person.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I hate that. Hate it. Play the game, and if you get to the end and you say, I still don't like it, that's fine. Let's discuss it. What didn't you like? Were you not supposed to like those things? When people say, oh, they're trying to make me love Ellie or Abby. No, they're not. They're trying to get you to understand Abby. You don't have to like her. You just have to see that there's another side of the story and that there is no hero, there is no villain. And again, these are themes, but if you play through the game without somebody else telling you what to think, you might make up your own mind and realize, okay, now I get what the storytellers were trying to do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. That's I mean, you're right. I think people just need to start to try to contextualize these issues within the reality of the story that's being told. A lot of people made up their minds before they saw the video games, before they played the video game. And it's the same way a lot of people make up their minds whenever there's a controversy about a film before they see it. And also, a lot of people played the game with confirmation bias constantly being at play rather than having an open heart and an honest experience with the game. In terms of extreme reactions, whenever you make such bold choices, bold artistic choices, and especially political choices, you will get extreme reactions. And it's also fortuitous that it's such a well-made and well-crafted video game. Like, anyone who tells you that the gameplay or the storytelling is not good is fucking lying. That's just, I'm sorry, if you're listening to this and you expect me to back up the opinions of people who feel like, oh, it's trash because of this story. No. Now, you may not like where it went. You may not like the choices that were made. That's completely separate from it being incredibly well made. That's a completely different thing. But people are just working with confirmation bias to the point where just because they don't like decisions, then they're saying that the game itself is not good. Those are two completely different things. I might not like the color green. It doesn't make green a bad color. It's just
and there's no middle ground anymore. You can't. You can't just kind of like it. You can't kind of hate it. It's either a 0 or a 10. Either way.
Exactly.
It's just tribal at this point. That's all it is.
Yes, it is. But I just to wrap that segment up, my hope to people is just one, don't fall into groupthink. Don't let other people's opinions and crowds and people shouting about something impact how you feel about things. I heard a lot of the rumors. I heard the all the yelling and stuff, and sometimes I feel it's quite warranted. Sometimes I'm a person that has been on the record in saying, for example, like the last Ghostbusters movie, I felt like, although I didn't feel the movie itself was terrible, I felt it was just meh. They could have done a better job in terms of not just going out and just completely erasing the whole legacy and just shoving women in there. You sometimes you do things with grace and with a little bit more finesse, so it doesn't look like you're forcing the action. So for me, it's a case-by-case basis. In this case, I think that if people went in with an open mind, that they would see the beauty in the game. But that's what I have to say about that. But now let's get into the details of how we felt about specific plot points. So the first one that you got to talk about is Joelle's death. Unfortunately, first off, did you guys know he was going to die earlier on before you played it? I want to know this. And if you did, how did that impact your experience? If you didn't, How did it end? Did you think it was a good decision? Would you have done something different? Blah, blah, blah. You guys, please be very, very honest about your opinions on this. Your exiles, and people expect that from you. So, Christian, start off.
So before we talk then about what happened to Joel, yeah, I kind of had an idea it was going to happen because there were so many damn articles about it. And as many spoilers, I mean, dude, as many spoilers and leaks as I was trying to stay away from, that was just everywhere. It was, everyone was saying, he's probably going to die.
You couldn't escape it.
You couldn't. That being said, while I expected it, the way it happened was still shocking and brutal. And gut-wrenching to see Ellie have to watch it. Oh my God, to see her have to watch it was gut-wrenching. I'll say this before, because I don't want to take up too much of your time with my thing, but where was Joel going to go? I've had this question in my mind, and I know other people have answered it, and I don't necessarily agree with their answers, which is fine. But it's kind of like Han Solo, right? I went back to Star Wars again. You can hate the execution in Force Awakens all you want, and that's fine. You can talk about that. But where was Han going? God bless you. Where was Han going in a post-Empire world? Joel made this controversial decision in the first game. And we tend to forget that the guy, he was a good father at the beginning there before Sarah died, but he's a smuggler. And like other people, he made horrible decisions in order to survive in that world. And like Mordo and Doctor Strange said, right, like the bill comes due. His decision in part 1 and then his vengeance death just push everything and continue that cycle of violence. And it forces us to experience everything in a different way. So I just question where Joel was going to go. If this was the kind of story that they were doing, talking about the cycle of violence, really questioning, making Abby and Ellie seem more alike than we want to admit they are, Joel kind of had to die in order for that to happen. Did he have to? Probably not. But then like Brandon said earlier, we might have had more of a road story yet again if that didn't happen. But I just feel like it was kind of something that maybe they had to do with Joel, because I don't know where else he could have gone in this new world that they were building. So that's my take.
All right. Brandon.
So
what's your take on this?
I've had this discussion with another exile, and I believe that Joel's death and how you feel about it boils down to who we are fundamentally and what we saw at the end of the first game. I understand Joel's decision. I can't say that whether I would or would not do the same thing. I'm not a father. I can't say if I would have done it, but I understand why he did it, and I understand the love that he did it with. I also understand that he made the wrong decision from a world standpoint. Did he deserve what was happening to him? As somebody who loves the character, no, because I love the character and you want to defend him. But in a very realistic manner, yes. He had what was coming to him. And it sucks to see it carried out in such a brutal way. But they didn't just make it, oh, the Fireflies are coming to get Joel, protect him. No, they made one person want to come and get retribution and continue this cycle of violence. I hated Joel's death, but I loved Joel's death because of where it took the story and how it made you feel, in how over time you rebuilt your relationship with Joel, where Ellie did the same thing. It took the whole game for you to understand that they were what he did wrong, whose choices he took away, and then his ultimate try for redemption. It's all told through flashbacks, but that feeds into the brutality that you feel when you were Ellie watching that all happen. So I am 100% on board with it, and I understand the meaning of it, and I understand you are not supposed to be happy that he died. And that's what people miss is you're supposed to feel the way that Ellie feels, and it works.
Yeah. And on this note, this is reminiscent of several other controversial pieces of cinema, storytelling that have been present in the pop zeitgeist over the past couple of years, most notably Batman v Superman and The Last Jedi, in which specific choices to portray particular characters as less than perfect and less than glorious, has affected the way that people feel about the media, and just basically cascaded into a torrent of hate against it. So, for example, Batman v Superman, one of the bones of contention was you had a Batman that was a villain. He was an antagonist for most of the film, and that made people so angry, and they didn't even understand why, how it portrays the themes that the storyteller is trying to tell. And then you have the Last Jedi with people, not my Luke. The whole thing. People, wanted Luke to come into this trilogy and be this, super warrior that they expect him to be, in this, beacon, and in the story they decided to take it in another way and show someone who was more jaded and more broken and had made mistakes, and was more human rather than superhuman. So in this one we get a Joelle who the story is not focused on him. He's not, Superman, Super Rambo saving the day. He's excised from the story very, very quickly. However, let's remember that he's in the story quite a lot, but it's in flashbacks. But you do get to spend a lot of time with him, and he does have his own story arc within this, and he's of huge importance on the story from the beginning to the end. So I think a lot of people are very short-sighted about things, but also it bears to mention, how do you feel about the first game? Because for me, I've always felt that the Last of Us franchise is about Ellie, not about Joelle. That's how I've always felt about it. It's not
I would agree with that.
Yeah, to me, it's never been about this guy that has to take care of this girl. It's about this special child. That's what it's always been for me. So although I love Joelle, and I've loved his character, how he was this protective father who really evolved, and their relationship through the first one, she's a surrogate daughter after he lost his own family. That beautiful character arc. I've always felt it's about Ellie. So for Ellie to go from being basically the co-star, the second billing, to the first billing is a natural progression, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's the exact same reason why I do not like the last Terminator movie, because they took John Connor, who is the main, figure in the entire Terminator saga, and they completely cut him out of it. So all these things, it has to do with a case-by-case basis, obviously. But yeah, it depends on how you feel about who Ellie is and her place in the story. So in terms of Joelle's death, I knew it was coming, but when it came, it didn't feel any less heartbreaking. For me, it was heartbreaking. It wasn't even the brutal one. Was very brutal because his brains were smashed all over the place. But it was very heartbreaking, and the director did a very good job because you saw it through Ellie's eyes, right? It was Ellie being helpless to the situation at hand, and obviously it's the nexus point of every single event that follows then from then on. That was a bold choice, and I applaud them for making the choice. Like, I think, as we all know, if you guys follow me on social media, I love bold storytelling. I like being challenged. I do not like things that are simple, generic, are expected. I'm not saying things should be forced. That's not what I'm saying. And in this case, I don't think it was forced. This is a very brutal world. Joelle went through a whole series and killed a lot of people. You think that's not going to come back to haunt him, but I'm getting more into themes. But for Joelle's death, those are my thoughts on it. I expected it. I actually wish I had no idea, to be honest. To be honest, I wonder what it would be like to play the game having no idea that he was going to die and have that just sprung on you. So in some way, I do regret being spoiled, but in another way, I just don't see how they could have kept that a secret, even with reviews and all that stuff. So, well, that's that. So let's go into plotting and structure. This doesn't just have an A to B structure to it. There are a lot of flashbacks, which actually the first game also did a good job of, flashbacks with people's story. But then you also have this thing where you're telling the story from the perspective of two characters who are kind of mirroring each other and are on a collision course. So guys, what do you think of the plotting and the structure of The Last of Us 2? And feel free to go into any details and any tangents you want. So let's start with Kristen.
Yeah, I agree. I think the structure itself was very good. To me, things didn't seem like they were forced in there, which I liked. The having to face the different factions and the world that they had to navigate, both Abby and Ellie, felt very natural to me as well. Nothing really seemed like, they put a building here on purpose or you ran into this person on purpose. It just felt like this is what would happen. Her interactions with Abby, for instance, her interactions with Isaac and having to then make that decision to run out into the world to rescue Owen and things like that, to me felt like that was probably something Abby would do. You also alluded to the flashbacks and switching perspectives. I think that fleshes out the story even more. And I think it's crucial to understanding who Abby is and who the wolves are, whether you like her or not. And I don't. I ended the game not liking Abby, but that doesn't mean I didn't sympathize with her, and it didn't mean I didn't understand her. And that's because I'm forced to look at things from her perspective, which is a bold choice. So I still think that was a great move by them, and her story seemed natural as well. My only complaint, and this is what I would end on, is I felt, this is again just a personal thing, I think it got a little bogged down at times during Abby's part. Her section at times felt a little too long. There was a little too much of the trifecta there with her, Owen, and Mel. I was like, really? I don't really need to get into a love triangle here. Like, come on, I'm done with that. But I also did like in that they focused on how her obsession was ruining her relationships. I thought that was important. That did say a lot about who Abby was. To me, it was just a hair long. And when we returned to Ellie for her entire that epilogue sequence with the Rattlers and everything, it was, to me, it was a bright spot again. I was reopened, made me fall in love with Ellie all over again, as much as I did feel for Abby and Lev. I fell back in love with Ellie all over again in that last sequence. So that would be my only complaint. It just, while the plot and the structure I thought was great, and I love that flashback stuff, just a tad too long with Abby.
Okay. Brandon, what do you think of the way the game was structured and plotted?
So at first I liked it, and it is kind of it is very, very harsh when you switch over to playing Abby. And a lot of people I've talked to were like, well, it should have gone back and forth, day one, day two. So you get a little bit of each person's. But when you sit back and you think about it, that would have made you get off the rails with Ellie, because the entire game, they want you to understand and be in the shoes of Ellie. They need you to fucking hate Abby. Everything you know about Abby is she is this tank. She is this monster. And even at the end of Ellie's first section, when she shows up and she's sleeveless and you just see this monster of Abby, you fucking hate her. And it only makes it worse when other characters start dying. And then it switches and you're like, wait, what? Now I got to play as Abby and we're back on day one? I mean, actually, even before that, we're back at the day that Joel killed the Fireflies, the day that everything changed. And you see a different Abby. You don't see this tank of a person. You don't see this monster. You see somebody just like Abby. You see a teenager who is just going about her day and whose entire life changed. And it just plots out so well that you see that she gave up her relationship. She gave up her life. Yeah. She turned herself into a Terminator to achieve this one goal and abandoned everything in her life. Yeah. And then when she finally achieves this goal, which you don't know yet, when she finally achieves it, she gets nothing out of it. Yeah. She still has the nightmares about her father. She still feels like she did the wrong thing. She lost her boyfriend. None of her friends really like her. She's got nothing now. and now she's on a path to redemption. So you're seeing mirror journeys at different points. At the beginning of the game, she's on Ellie's journey at the end, and at the end of the game, she's on the path of redemption. And it doesn't. It's not until those two stories meet closer to the end when the cycle of violence continues, and Abby is ready to kill again. She's ready to get vengeance again. And then this is what ties in to choice, is that at that very moment she chooses to break that cycle, and she can move on and grow and go off with Lev and be a better person. And I loved how it showed that. But Ellie didn't get that choice. She was beaten by her monster. So she didn't get that choice, so it continued to haunt her. Yeah. And she had to go after Abby. And then you get to the end again, where they recondense, and you see Abby in the worst possible situation. But what most people don't get is Abby's decision to not kill everybody in the theater that day brought Ellie to save her life.
Yep.
Her breaking the cycle of violence saved her life. Yeah. And because of that, Ellie was able to make the choice not to kill Abby, which saved Ellie's life, although she gave up everything to get to that point and now has nothing.
All right. Okay.
Beautiful structure.
Yeah.
I didn't get it at first, but when you sit back and you look at it, I don't think it could have played out any other way.
Yeah. Just hold that, because when we get to themes, I'm really gonna want you to hone in on those thoughts. So what I'll say about the plotting and the structure is that I really like the flashbacks, because it brought Joelle back into the story, a character that we actually like. So it's not like he was excised from the story and then completely discarded of. Yes, getting into Abby, I absolutely hated it. It was very jarring. And I would make this analogy now. If anyone has been sexually assaulted or kidnapped in any way, please, I hope this doesn't trigger you, and I hope you don't take offense to it. But it almost felt like you were being forced to reconcile or to live with or to engage with someone who abused you. That's what it felt like, because you'd built up all this hate towards Abby, and then you have to play her, and you have to save her life, and you have to, it's like you were being forced to humanize her. It's kind of like the way a lot of people got, kind of angry when news outlets were humanizing Donald Trump after a lot of abhorrent things that he had done. But it worked on me because I ended up liking her and understanding her, and the way the mirror, image of both of them. You see how alike they are first, then it kind of flips to the point where Ellie becomes more of the villainous, more obsessed one, the more damaged one. And I thought that the escalation and the way they turned the tables bit by bit was really, really good. In terms of length, I like the length. I like lengthy things. I'm not paying freaking like 60 pounds or whatever for a video game, and then it's only going to be like a short, brisk thing. I'm okay with the length. I like long movies. I like to get my bang for my buck, so I was okay with the length. So I really think that they did a good job with the plot, and the structure was masterfully done. It could easily have fallen apart, become convoluted or confusing, but I think Neil Druckmann, the director, did a very, very good job of keeping everything on the rails, and also giving it that very unexpected, non-generic structure. So 2 thumbs up for me. I think that's actually like the best part of the video game and the storytelling, is how it was plotted and structured. So with that being said, let's go deeper into some actual relationships. I think what makes this franchise very, very powerful are its characters, and obviously characters don't exist in silos. They exist as social beings interacting with each other. So let's start with the most foundational and pivotal relationship, Joelle and Ellie. How do you guys like the growth, the evolution, the path in which their relationship took in this sequel? Let's start with Christian.
Man, Joel and Ellie, I mean, as you said, Ellie, to me, even in the first game, she's really the star, and you are playing as this tank and Joel in the first game, but their relationship in part 2 here is the central driving force for everything that Ellie does, even though he dies fairly early, but we keep seeing him right over and over. And especially when we as the gamers learn that they fought over his decision in part 1, fought over what he did to humanity. And while they were fixing their relationship and she decided she was going to do that, it wasn't whole yet. They needed more time. So Ellie feels empty. And no matter what he did in the first game, he's a father figure to her. He's a friend to her. She needs him in her life. She loves him. We talked about music before, so I won't go back into that again. But like, she can't let his death go. It's impossible. It's interesting because Abby actually could. Like Brandon said, she let Ellie live and broke the cycle. Ellie couldn't. She can't sleep. She can't eat. And it's so important to her to finally break that cycle herself for this to end. And when she realizes everything and she returns home and Tommy's telling her of Abby's whereabouts and all that, everything of that is all stemming from her relationship with Joel. All of that. And she can't do it. And then when she finally cashes in, quote unquote, and does it, even though she does break the cycle, I understand that. It's empty when she comes back. She's got nothing and she's moving toward an uncertain future. And I think for me, Ellie is so human. She's so broken and she's far from perfect. And I am far from perfect. And I think I'm a little broken myself. And I feel so much for her. I was almost moved to tears by Ellie's story at the end of this game. And it's all because of her relationship with Joel. Whether you like what he did in the first game or not, it's all because of her relationship with Joel. Yeah.
All right, Brandon. Briefly, what do you think of that fundamental relationship? How it played out in The Last of Us 2?
Well, I mean, Christian really nailed it on the head. Obviously, at the beginning, you get an idea that there's tension there, and that's kind of normal. You're going from a 14-year-old to a 19-year-old. And life has changed. You can tell that Joel has changed, but through the flashbacks, you just kind of see their relationship grow, and you see the love, and then you see it fall apart, and that is just kind of what leads you on this journey. And it was good to see that they were human, but then at the end of the game, when she finally does give in and break that cycle, she sees the last positive moment of Joel, where the rest of the game she'd only seen his death and seen the terrible moments. She sees the love, and that's when she decides to let go. And then that final scene on the porch was just absolutely beautiful, where she's like, you know what, I may never forgive you, but I'm willing to try. And just that meant everything to Joel. And then that was the hardest thing, is she never got to try, because the next day she watched him die. And that's where you just feel for Ellie again. But it is all through that emotional journey that people say is not there, that they were robbed of because they didn't play the game.
Yeah. I agree with you guys. I don't have too much to add to it. I think the evolution was organic. She's a teenager becoming a woman in her own. We all have, arguments and, conflict with our parents, because that's just the way life is. And I think that it kind of showed why she was so damaged by his execution, because they weren't on perfect terms when he passed. So she had that trauma of she wasn't able to, things weren't perfect. They hadn't had a perfect reconciliation. So that was part of what was pushing her. And obviously was the impetus for all her obsession, and part of her finding peace in the end had to do with her, obviously, as Brandon alluded to, had to do with her reconciling with him, even though he wasn't present, but reconciling with him in her heart. And I just thought it was a very powerful evolution, and a very complex relationship. As I said, one of the reasons why I love the storytelling of The Last of Us, the entire franchise, is because it puts these characters in conflicting, very dramatic situations. It's not just a simple, oh, I love you, or I forgive you, and love cures all, and I choose love over everything. Life is not that simple. Life is super complex, and these stories show us that complexity. And even though it's quite bleak and quite dark, there is still hope that even though we may not be able to completely put an entire bow on things, we can still heal, we can still move on. So their relationship, it's going to stay with me forever. I just think I think it's a thing of beauty. Now let's move on to another relationship. This one's a controversial one, though it should not be at all. Ellie and Dina, their relationship took center stage. Ellie is an LGBTQ character, so is Dina. She gets a relationship with a beautiful young woman, and they start a family. So, guys, what do you think of this relationship? You could talk about it from point of controversy or not. We know it shouldn't be, and also just what it brings to the story. So, any angle you want to tackle it from, we'd like to hear. Christian, start us off.
Yeah, I think that, the LGBTQT controversy there is a little ridiculous. I mean, who honestly cares? Although I did like the little nod to the town bigot, and Ellie got her one up on him, in there, which was kind of nice because, he decided to make his little comment. Joel came to her defense, and she kind of gave him the fuck you, So it's nice that she was able to get her little F you to the guy. But that being aside, I thought that it was very important, personally, for Ellie to find someone else to find and love other than Joel. And that's part of growing up and moving away from your parents or your parental figure. And I've read a couple places online now that I've played the game that they found Dina to be a little annoying. I disagreed. She was a bit of a badass at certain parts when you needed her to be, and you needed her help. I was a little disappointed that she didn't tell Ellie that she might be pregnant and then came on the journey anyway, but it showed how much she cared about Ellie. And that's so important. Ellie needs that positive force. And I also want to say that I really did feel that their eventual hookup felt very natural. I didn't think it was gratuitous at all. I thought it was done very tastefully and respectfully. And I thought their little peak of a normal life at the very end was really nice. It was very moving. And when Ellie returned and the child and Dina were gone, was painful. And it made me question, is Ellie ever going to find happiness? Seriously, is she ever going to find it? So I still think it was a very important relationship in this game.
Brandon, you could take the baton from there.
I thought it was very well handled. It just felt like a real relationship. Again, as I said earlier, I don't look at characters for who their gender is or for what their preferences are. I just look at characters, and throughout the entire game, you could see it in Dina's reactions to everything that she really loved Ellie. Just the way she was willing to take off her mask in the spores. That's actually one of my favorite scenes in the entire game. When, Ellie's mask breaks and she flips out, or just when you're trying to climb the Fedra wall, right when you get to Seattle and you almost fall, and, Dina comes and runs up there. She's got a pure worry for Ellie, and I think that's very wonderful. I think the biggest issue is that Ellie doesn't love herself. She feels like she has no value in her life. She feels like she lost her chance to mean something to the world, and she's trying to come to grips with having somebody that likes her. And I love seeing that lack of confidence in everything, because that mirrors sometimes how I feel. And just not having a lot of purpose or anything like that, but that there is, and there's other people around you. And I thought that worked really well. One note about the whole pregnancy thing was, if you actually go through the journal in the game, they were on the road for 2 months before they got to Seattle, or a month, something like that. So, I mean, it had been weeks. So she didn't know until they were halfway to Seattle already. And even then, it's not like they probably found a pregnancy test on the on the rack at some abandoned Walgreens. It's still just like, hey, I'm feeling a little sick. Maybe it's COVID-19. Maybe I'm pregnant. I don't know. But it's just, it wasn't just a couple of days, because obviously it just immediately cuts to you being in Seattle. But there's more in the journal about running into hunters and running into clickers and things like that. So there is more of it, and they just didn't really know until you get to Seattle and you start to understand. So there's more of it there, but overall, I thought it was a very real relationship, and I loved all the moments in it.
Yeah, I think it was a very necessary relationship, because it's a very bleak, dark, deliciously brutal, and unrelenting, nightmarish horror reality, and this was the one oasis of kindness and warmth and love. So just in terms of how you structure a story and tell a story, I think it was necessary. It was very welcome. As Christian said, very natural, very organic. In terms of people saying that they're forcing LGBTQ stories, that's absolute bullshit, and it's damn near reprehensible to think like that. If your mindset whenever you see a lesbian or LGBTQ story in something is that they're forcing it in, like, you really need to take a step back and really self-critique yourself and try to think about why it is that you feel that of the characters and their nature is an affront to you. My question would be like, what are you like why? I think that people need to grow as people, and need to do better. Hold yourself to a higher standard. It's just a beautiful relationship, period, whether it was man or woman or man or man or woman or woman. Now, the interesting thing that I was thinking about is, with all the controversy, and was that in media we see a lot of lesbian relationships. We don't see a lot of gay relationships, and that's interesting. I don't have the answer to that, but I feel like a lot of creators in media, when they have LGBTQ stories, a lot of times it's female on female, and I think that still has to do with the fact that we're not as far along as we need to be in terms of accepting LGBTQ relationships. I think that straight men are more open to seeing females together than they are men together. So that's just a random thought that I have. I'm not saying I have an answer to it, but it's going to be interesting to see how we can progress and we can be better as people in the future. But the relationship was just so good. The way it devolved in the end was heartbreaking, but also organic. Also part of this complexity that we talk about in stories. I mean, Ellie had everything she ever wanted, and someone who loved her dearly and desperately, and a reason to stay, and a reason to let everything go. But she was so damaged, so addicted to vengeance, and so broken that she could not stay. And part of it, we wouldn't say has to do with her fault. I think she also just felt like she wasn't good enough for the relationship, as Brandon alluded to, in terms of having panic attacks and being so damaged. She probably felt that the necessary thing that she needed to do was to balance the karmic scales in whatever sort of twisted way that she felt, get revenge for Joelle, and that would heal her, as maybe misguided as that was. And then she could be good enough for Dina and their child. Yeah, it was that relationship, another complex relationship that I have no answers for, but it really just makes you think about life. And we've all been in different relationships. If you're not lucky enough to have met like your sweetheart when you were like 12 years old, and you get married and you live happily ever after, a lot of us have been in relationships that failed, whether it failed because of us or the other person, or it was mutual or whatever. And that's the complexity of life. Everything is not happily ever after. And a lot of times, when you're in a relationship and someone asks you, why did your previous relationship end? And you just don't have a neatly tied, well thought out answer. It's just, life is very, very complex. So I love that we got to see the beauty and the romantic parts of their relationship, but also the real heartbreaking, complex, gut-wrenching parts of relationships that we just don't have answers for. So that's my take on that. So another relationship that I think is very important is, and mirrored, Ellie and Dina in a way, although it was not a romantic relationship, was Abby and Lev. What do you guys think of this relationship? And you can expatiate on Lev as a character because we haven't spoken much about Lev. So let's start with Christian.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add here, so I'll try to keep it short. I mean, Abby and Lev, to me, were Joel and Ellie from the first game, and I think that was what was so interesting, that they decided to show how human Abby had become. It really humanized Abby to have her become this protector of Lev. And like I said, I've said it before. I know I don't like Abby, but I understand her and I sympathize with her. And look, she's finally starting to redeem herself, and it's Lev that helps her to refocus that humanity in the same, her care for humanity in the same way that Ellie did for Joel. In that scene where she's about to freaking slit Dina's throat, and Ellie's like, she's pregnant, she's saying it as she's, punched to death. And I don't fucking care. She's about to slit her throat. It's Lev that says, hey, she's pregnant. We're not like that. What are you doing? So it's so important that they become the Joel and Ellie, and then they're on the road together at the end. They're trying to find the Fireflies and everything.
Yep.
So I thought that was a really cool full circle moment. It was important for him to be safe at the end when they're cut down after Ellie rescues them. And when it's over and she's taking Lev with her. She's going to protect him. Just a really cool full circle thing to me.
Yeah. Brandon, what do you think of that relationship?
A lot of what Christian said is it really did mirror the first game and that journey, and just where it comes to the head with Ellie and Dina at the end. It's Lev that shows the true poison of vengeance, and Abby was about to become the monster that Abby thought she was, even though we just played for her for 10, 12 hours and know that she's not. She's really not that monster. But she was about to be, and it was Lev's humanity, Lev's innocence, even though Lev was the enemy 3 days ago. It's that it was that relationship and that level of trust that finally broke that cycle for Abby, and to see them come back together in Santa Barbara and just be friends and have good humor, and Abby to almost take up a mother-like figure or a big sister figure to Lev was wonderful. And then even at the end, the terrible moment at the pillars, where Abby gets down off of her pillar and the only thing she cares about is getting Lev out of there. And I think that's what ultimately breaks the cycle for Ellie, is seeing that there is love there, there's something else there, and not just a monster. You see this withered away being that you have built up in your own mind, and I think a lot of that is because of that relationship that you've built with Lev throughout the game. And so awesome character, and it's one of those things where people are mad that Lev is trans. It's like, I didn't even get that. I just saw the character. Like I got it more the second playthrough where they discussed it a little bit more, but it was just a good character.
Yeah.
The rest of it didn't matter, and that's testament to great writing.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you guys, and I really, actually, I didn't see the parallel between Joelle and Ellie and Abby and Lev until you guys just brought that up. So that's brilliant. Well,
mind blown.
Mind blown. But maybe on a subconscious level, I might have felt it because, as you guys said, that relationship, that is the singular thing that humanized Abby. Her desire to protect Lev and be his mother and guardian and protector, and that's what made me fall in love with Abby as a character. And I ain't going front. Towards the end of this game, I started to prefer Abby to Ellie. I can't even front. But I think that the Lev as a transgender character, I think was really, really brilliant. It was another twist and another reveal in a story full of twists and reveals, and it added such a beautiful wrinkle to the tapestry of the tale. I really think that, one, was it 100% necessary to be there? No, but what it added to it was richness, more texture, more themes. As I said, I love a good twist, and it was a twist I did not see coming at all. And all it played naturally into the nature of who the Seraphites are in terms of very going back to that sort of like religious conservative type of
Oh yeah.
society. Yeah, I think that relationship was necessary, and I think it was brilliant in the story in every single way. I hope that this is not the last we see of those characters, honestly. And I hope that they're not just given to us in a DLC or something like that. I hope that in the future, we get to experience, where their story goes, because I'm very, 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 very curious. And speaking of these characters, did you guys get a kind of like Martha moment with when Abby was gonna slit Dina's throat and Lev was like, "Don't do it," kind of?
I don't
Without
know.
the Martha moment, yes.
Yeah,
It was more of the lowest falling
yeah,
on the other
exactly.
person
That's what I mean by
finally
the Martha moment.
breaking that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of someone having so much hate and being ready to kill no matter what, and someone stopping them and bringing them back from the brink. I thought that was interesting. So yeah, I think those three relationships are like the key foundational ones that
Yep.
entire story revolve around them. But are there any other important relationships that you think bear mentioning? If not, we can move on.
I think very briefly, and I'll keep it very, very brief. Even though the love triangle between Mel, Owen, and Abby drove me kind of crazy,
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that was important because it
Mm.
showed how far Abby, like how deep she was going. She was really just cutting herself off. She lost a guy that she was definitely falling in love with. He went with somebody else. He still had feelings for her, obviously. Poisoned
Obviously.
her. Yeah, obviously. So there's a couple of scenes there that are duh, and one is a little uncomfortable. And then Mel, of course, calls her a piece of shit. So I mean, it's just it poisoned everything that she did. But I think that trifecta there is also important because it shows a lot of who Abby is, and God, how deep she's gone down the rabbit
Mhm.
hole. Yeah.
And also, it kind of mirrors Ellie and Dina in terms of how their obsession with vengeance
Hmm.
robs them of giving themselves entirely to people who love them and people who care about them and people who
Yeah.
see the goodness in them. Uh,
Agreed.
that's definitely mirrored in those two
Yeah.
characters. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. That love triangle was uncomfortable, but it was also supposed to be. Whereas
Yeah.
Abby was the odd one out, and again, it was meant to mirror that she had sacrificed everything
Mm-hmm.
to get her vengeance, and she doesn't realize it until she gets that vengeance, what she's now lost,
Yep.
and now what she's trying to reobtain and take from somebody else.
Yeah. And
Uh,
and
and
that also, not to cut you off, but that also ties into Abby and Lev's relationship, because I feel like that Lev helps Abby find her goodness again and her worth as a
Right.
person, not just as some killing machine soldier person hell bent on violence. She had someone to take care of and someone to love and someone to be good towards.
Hmm.
Yeah, so please carry on.
No, again, I was just the people that you hated at the beginning of the game, all the wolves. Manny, you kind of like him when you're
Yeah.
playing as Abby. He's
Yeah.
he's a cool side character.
Yeah.
Uh, Owen is a very real person. I mean,
Mhm.
he's just a normal dude. He's a nice guy, and
Mhm.
he's actually voiced by Patrick Fugit from Almost Famous.
Mm.
So it's one of those things where you're like, I kind of just like this guy.
Mhm.
And when you look back and you see it from all the perspectives, you see he was the one that was trying to stop Abby. Like, hey, maybe don't do
Mhm.
this.
Yep.
Are you going to come
Yep.
back? You need to get this done. We need to go. She's just that machine, and she won't let go. And he understands, but he's ready to move on
Yeah,
and get out of there. He tries to stop at every moment, but she won't. So
but you won't.
again,
Yeah.
all those relationships are enriched when you
Mhm.
see the other side of the story, because they were all just the monsters before. They were all just
Yep.
the bad guys.
Yep.
And that's a very good segue, because I wanted to talk a little bit about the different settlements and the different factions. We have Jackson, which is home base, where we start out the journey, and then we are introduced to WLF, which are the Wolves, the Seraphites / the Scars, and obviously we revisit the Fireflies. So, what do you guys think of like the differences between them? What do they bring, each of them, to the story? Did you like some parts of it? Do you not like some parts of the different factions? Just your general thoughts on. You can talk about all of them, or just pick one and go in. Christian, you can start.
I'll definitely keep it very general. I think it looked like a very lived in post-apocalyptic world, and that was beautiful. And I loved how they did that. I really loved the differences between the different settlements that, based on who they were, grew the way they grew. And, Jackson, like you said, was a home base, and they now have a functioning middle America society. That's, they still, of course, have to go out and do guard duty and check on the infected and blah, blah, blah. But they do. The Seraphites, well, they're very fundamentalist, kind of crazy cult, and when you traverse their territory, holy crap, are they scary? I mean, they are. Those whistles will haunt my nightmares. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
So the wolves are militaristic, so it makes sense when you're when you're in the wolf camp. It's yes, commander, yes, sergeant, yes, and there's a brotherhood there and everything. I liked the way they had the little differences built in, and I felt that it made sense based on the upbringing or the story of that particular group. I thought it was a great attention to detail. Yeah, made it a very lived-in world. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. Brandon, what do you think?
Same thing. I loved seeing that, they had found some semblance of society in Jackson, that there was restaurants and there was stores. There was a barbecue joint there. They had parties. They just moved on with normal. And, they went out and they did their duty to protect everybody, and they came home. And then you get to Seattle, and it's a completely different situation. There is no settlement. There is nothing. I mean, you have a war that was between the government and the wolves, and that hardened the wolves. And then you have the religious people that had moved away and gotten their own island, but then now they're at war with each other. If there's one group I wish I would have known more about, it's the Seraphites. I love that, even Lev was like, this wasn't the teaching of our prophets. The gutting of people or the violence was not her teachings. And just in 30 years, things have devolved into brutal, cultist, ritualistic violence. And these two are at war. And then you get to the end with the Rattlers, and these are just people that don't live by rules. And they keep slaves, and they keep the infected like they're animals, and tease them. They don't have the respect. So everywhere you go, there's a different kind of group, because there is no society anymore. There is just, there's tribalism, and that's it.
Yeah. I agree with you guys. I thought it was really good for world building and creating a very believable world, for evolving the mythology of the world that the characters inhabit, and showing that, when society breaks down and we no longer are bound by our concepts and these ephemeral, intangible things that unite us together, people are going to have different responses, right? So Jackson is this sort of utopic society, like a safe haven, nostalgic in a way. The Seraphites obviously are an indictment on religion and what happens, like going back to the old world of religion and adding a little bit of savagery and barbarism to it. The commentary on how things devolved from the teachings of their prophetess. That is also some commentary on religion. And I grew up in a very religious house. I am a spiritual person, not religious per se. And so I understand the criticism of how religion has its sort of core tenets and what it starts out as, and then humans can corrupt it and mangle it into something else. And then the WLF, also militaristic society, We see how they also devolved, and in their own way, although they are less overtly barbaric, they are just as savage and backwards as the Seraphites. And I love the way the Fireflies were brought back into the story and sprinkled, and the Fireflies sort of representing also a little bit of hope for the future. Yeah, I thought that it was brilliant, and obviously the way that you interact with the different factions and their different strategies was also very important to making a game that it just makes it feel so much more real. And this game is going to be influential, highly influential on video games coming out in the future. Like the bar has been set, and I can't wait to see, what the future has for the games that we play. So I think what separates this video game from others in storytelling are the themes. So I would like each person to pick one or two. You don't have to pick two if one is all you have to talk about, and discuss like the one or two most important. They're like 100 themes, but just pick one or two most important themes that you want to highlight of what this video game is saying to its audience about us as humans, about us as a community, as a society, and as a people. So let's start with Christian.
For me, what I like the most is that I think that the story, really makes us question humanity and question ourselves. The game has a tendency to focus on how the live living humans are actually worse than the infected. The infected can't control what they are. They just do what they do. They've become infected, and that's it. Now, certain encounters with them, like when you have to deal with a bunch of stalkers, or that rat king, or when you're overwhelmed, it can be tense and it can be stressful. And yes, you hate the infected and you just want to gut them. But you just are protecting yourself. That's really all it is. You just don't want to get infected. You don't want to die. But we actually, in this game, it's almost like you learn to hate some of the other living humans out there. The living humans in this game, for the most part, are hard, extreme. Some of them are unlikable, with exceptions. Of course, there's exceptions. And we treat one another like dirt in this game, just like we do in our reality right now. And I think that's the trick of the game. We learn to hate the wolves at first because they're hunting Ellie. But then we learn to sympathize with them when we play as Abby, right? I might not like Abby, but man, do we sympathize with her. And we don't spend enough time, as Brandon alluded, with the Seraphites, out of what they did to Lev and his sister, and then Abby rescuing and all that kind of stuff. So they're a bit more dehumanized. So I find myself actually hating them more in the game, but that's because it was just easy for me to do it, right? I mean, you learn about them, which is fantastic, but it would have been great to learn a little bit more, like Brandon said, maybe what happened before the prophet got there and really turned them into fundamentalism and went them off. But it's what humans do to one another. And I think it's really important that we recognize this, and that's what the game was making us admit. What are the costs of the decisions that we make? What are the costs of justice? What are the costs of creating these factions and everything? And we can't dehumanize one another. You said it before, Lupe. People got a serious problem because one of the lead characters, or two of them, are LGBTQ. That says more about you having a fucking problem with that than it does about the game putting that person in there. And you're forced to make those decisions and deal with those people throughout the game. The infected are just the infected. The other humans, though, why do we hate them so much? So I really like the fact that the game made you question that, made me sometimes feel bad for hating somebody.
Brandon, what about you?
For me, it's the cycle of violence and the themes of choice and consequence, which I've touched both on already. That for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and it all started with Joel. Even if you look past his past, it's not what he did to the Fireflies; it's what he did to Abby, and his choice led to Abby, which led to Ellie, and just seeing how these people devolve. I mean, you go through the game torturing people, literally beating people to death as the player, not realizing it. And then when you meet up with Abby in the middle, and you killed all of my friends, Abby has to realize the consequences for her actions. What she chose to do led to all of her friends dying. She now gets the cycle of violence. And when does it stop? When do you just look past? And when you get to the end and Abby tells Joel, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm willing to try. That's where she sees Abby is okay, look, I'm not going to forgive you what you did, but I've got to try. Like, I have to move on. I have to get past this. And, you have your choice and you have your consequences, and it comes up, and it just leads to this endless cycle of violence. If she would have killed Abby, would Lev have come for her? Who would be coming for Ellie at that point? Would anybody in Jackson be safe? Would Dina be safe? And again, you have your consequences. Ellie makes the choice to go and do this. And even though she made the good decision, or the right decision in the end, she came back and she lost. She had nothing. She ended up with the one thing she was afraid of more than anything in the world, and that was being alone. And now she can't even play the guitar anymore. She doesn't even have music anymore. She has nothing. And it's the story of forgiveness. And, yes, it's hard, but going after trying to make things even only ever makes things worse. Nothing ever gets better out of it. And I love that it went after those challenging ideas and subjects.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just I'll piggyback off that a little bit in terms of talking about consequence. I think the term that I really want people to hone in on is consequence-free violence. And in a lot of our media, we're given images of the hero who uses violence to achieve their goals and celebrate it, and they live happily ever after. They solve everything, and it's a very dangerous fantasy, and it's a fantasy that, as I've become more mature, I feel we shouldn't indulge in a lot, and that's why a director like Zack Snyder is one of my favorite directors, because he constantly harps on that in a lot of his movies. He makes sure that, the consequences of violence are laid bare, so you don't, assimilate this culture that makes you think that the exercise of violence is something to be glorified. There is a price and there is a cost for it. And as Brandon said, we see all the things that Ellie lost. And even talking about her losing things, she lost things because of the things that Joelle did. But then this segues into my main point, which is that we have to think about whose fault is it. And sometimes you just have to chalk it up to it's the world in which they found themselves in was a brutal world, and it made them suffer so much. Nobody's born evil. Nobody's born bloodthirsty and bloodlustful. But the world was such a savage, bitter world that they found themselves in these horrendous situations, and they didn't make the best choices. They weren't lucky enough to be very wise, and they weren't lucky enough to have been at the end of their character arc at the beginning of their journey. And we can reflect on some of that in life. I'm from Chicago, so I know a little bit about the cycle of violence. I know a little bit about what violence can do to communities, and it's stuff that I have studied and been very in tune with. And sometimes it's about the situation that people are born in. And so those are some of these complex things, because I mean, as someone who's, from Chicago, I've had discussions with people who just say, why has there been no solution to, the violence that's been going on for years? And it's like, real life is not easy. It's not, you can't just, say, oh, I believe in love and everything is going to, go away. So those are two very important themes that I think it explores and asks us to think very much about. Consequence-free violence in media, I think, is something that creators should be more aware about, not just consequences on the people who the violence is perpetrated on. Obviously, it's a very brutal game, and you see, there's a lot of blood, the sound effects, that whole thing. But the person who's meting out the violence, there's a consequence for using violence on your mental state, on the people around you, violence coming back to you in karmic fashion, and also the environments that people find themselves in that can, turn them into who they end up being. Okay, so we have, had a quite positive discussion about this. We haven't had too many negative things to say. So on our way out, I'd like us to try to balance the scales a little bit. Nothing is perfect in life. So what's your least favorite thing about the game? As hard as it might be, Christian, start us off.
So I went into two things that I know before. We won't go into detail again. You guys know I had an issue with some of the wonky controls and the fact that Abby's story, to me, went a hair too long. It was a bit too long, got a little touch boring at times to me, but didn't destroy the game. The single biggest thing to me that was a disappointment in this game that I think the first game nailed and hit out of the park was Ellie's story, learning about Ellie, and that growth of the relationship between her and Joel across the country as he grew to love her and adopt her as a daughter, replacing Sarah with Ellie. Everything about that, I think, was just done better than this game and made it a bit of a stronger story. People are going to say I'm knocking this game because of that. You've listened to us for the last hour and a half. You know that's not true. I love this game. I just think that was a little more powerful than the cycle of violence story that we got in this. Doesn't make it less engrossing. Definitely doesn't. I still love this game, but if that's a 5-star game, that makes this like 4 to 4.5 for me. Okay. So, yeah.
All right. Brandon, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle to find much to complain about in this game. I would say that the biggest thing is just that jolt when you switch in the middle. It's hard to deal with until you get it 10 hours later on why it's happening. And that's not really a knock on the game at all. It's tough to swallow at first. I will say that maybe Abby's it was a little bit, maybe too long, maybe a little bit too relentless, but is the path to redemption, should it be harder than the path to vengeance? Maybe it should. So, it did always feel around every corner there was something going on that Abby had to deal with, where Ellie got a few more peaceful moments here and there. There was none for Abby. Almost everything with Abby was action the whole time. So there is a stark contrast between the two halves of the campaign. But once you get to the end and you really think about it, to me, it works, and it works beautifully. It's just, it is hard to swallow that switch because it is a drastic change.
Okay. For me, just a couple of things. One, I talked about the musical score. I felt really let down by how underwhelming it was in comparison to the first one, which was sublime. Then also, just in the lead up, I felt like the game was delayed for me. I just felt it was too much. And we talked about this on ENN. I felt at some point it began to feel like they were, taking advantage of the audience, because obviously we're being very patient, we're understanding, but at some point it got a little bit ridiculous, and it got to the point where there was a bit of, I don't know the exact word to use, but it just felt like they were a bit too confident about how long they could delay the game and the audience still have faith. And I think that's what resulted in some of the backlash that they felt. I think it got to the point where people just got tired of being patient with them. And I think
some of that ended up on Sony's doorstep, though, because when they officially announced the game and the release date for it, it was like 3 days later that they pushed it back, which means that Sony said, hey, we're doing this conference. I need a release date right now. We want to show people that it's coming out. And Sony did this at the beginning of the generation, where they'd announce a whole bunch of games, a whole bunch of release dates, and then none of them hit it. They wanted something to get people excited right then. And I think Naughty Dog wasn't ready for that. So that, I think, falls on Sony. The second one was, hey, we're not ready yet. And then the third one was like, hey, we're in a pandemic, and game is about a pandemic, and everybody has to work at home. Less their fault, but the more times you push back, the greater the chances of leaks happening. Yeah. So I do think that did feed into it. But in the end, I would rather have the game right the first time than than have a Fallout 76 or a Mass Effect Andromeda situation
Yeah,
where a month afterwards they abandon the game and pretend it doesn't exist
yeah.
anymore because they fucked it up so bad.
Yeah. I mean, regardless of the circumstances, it just the whole thing was just botched and could have been handled better because at the end of the day, you can tell that they knew that they had messed up with the delays because after the controversy came out, that was when they reacted by announcing the release date. So it's obvious that they knew that, part of the reason why they were getting that backlash was because of all
They
the
had
delays and
they
the
had to release at that
yeah.
point. Like, hey, we got
Yeah.
to get it out or everybody gets it ruined for them. So yeah,
Exactly.
that was on the last one. I definitely.
Yeah.
I
So
do have a question that's not on the list. If
no,
I
one
may.
second. I'm not finished. I'm
Oh,
not
I'm
finished.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So so I think that they botched, all the delays and all that stuff. And then also I thought that Ellie and Abby. I mean, the characters are overpowered. It was like you're a superhero with mutant abilities. So sometimes that was just hilarious to me. I mean, I'd be immersed and enjoying it, and then I'd be thinking like, man, this girl is about to take out a whole army of people just on her own. So there was that, and then also it kind of like plays back to like when Joelle is killed. I'm like, come on, if Ellie's this freaking super soldier superhero, of course she would have been able to take out that room. At least she would have known what's going on. I know what I would have done. I know how I'd have played that part and saved Joelle. But you
Sounds
can't.
like you played it too easy.
No, I'm saying, but you can obviously make excuses and whatever that maybe she was being emotional, so she ran in without, so. But obviously, it's a video game, and you have to make it enjoyable. And if it's like real life, she'll just get killed in the beginning. That's all.
Play it on
Uh,
survivor mode.
then also my final sort of thing that wasn't my favorite was so her catharsis or her moment of healing came with the scene on the porch where she's able to visualize Joelle and have the discussion about not being able to forgive him, but going on that journey. And I felt that could have been sprinkled throughout the game, and it would have had better effect at the end. I think that porch scene, just coming right at the end, was not the best directing and storytelling. I would have liked to have had that sprinkled throughout the game and had that difficulty of coming to that conclusion, and then at the end you get that that resolution to bring everything together. I thought that portion, especially just only being at the end, I think that they could have done a better job and it would have been even more powerful. Although I really liked the end, I really thought it was well concluded, but I thought that was a missed opportunity for that scene to have been sprinkled right from the beginning after Joelle is killed. I thought that could have been so powerful. So yeah, those are my only sort of like nitpicks. Apart from that, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So guys, final thoughts, and I would like you to give an overall grade, whether you want to do it out of 1 out of 10 or percent or on a letter grade scale. So Christian, what are your final thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2?
Final thoughts. I think, you know what, while I like the first game a little more, you guys know that, this one was still, wow, an experience. It was exhausting. It was tense. It was truly immersive. I think the characters are fully fleshed out human beings, which is important. Not a knock on us, of course, when I say the first one is a little better. It's not a knock on Last of Us 2 at all. It's just, to me, a little hard to live up to that first one. But I really think this game did a very good job of continuing Ellie's character, growing with her. I love her more now at the end of this game, even more probably because she is so human. Showed us the consequences of violence in the violent world that they live in. We've talked about this how many times, and that bold choice to concentrate on Abby for half of the game and to force you to understand the world from her perspective, to feel her pain. Man, beautiful game. I would just ask anybody, please play it with an open mind. Stop listening to the narratives out there. If the first one is a 5-star for me game, and it is, this one comes in real close between 4 and 4.5. Very, very good game.
Nice. Yeah. Brandon, what do you think?
Just top to bottom, I try not to compare it to the first one. I know it's borderline impossible. It's just a completely different experience. It's a completely different tale. It's hard to put the two side by side and say which I love better. I thought this was a complete masterpiece on its own. I think the first one is a masterpiece on its own. I give this one a 9.5 out of 10. Maybe I could go up to a 10. I have so much that I can't fault it for. I'm so glad that I avoided all the leaks and made up my own mind and had people to talk to, because this game is better with discussion.
Absolutely, I agree. For me, I'm going to make the comparison that I always make. I mean, Man of Steel and Batman v Superman are some of my favorite films of all time. So, if I like other films, or other pieces of storytelling art, it's quite probable that they share things in common. So if you look at Man of Steel is a masterpiece on its own. It's a celebration of Superman. It's sort of more energetic, and it's just an origin story, and you just got your great film. Then you come to Batman v Superman, also a masterpiece, but it's darker, obviously much more controversial. There are a lot of people that absolutely hate that film, and there are a lot of people like me and Brandon who absolutely adore it. So in terms of The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2, I see that similarity. I think that they're both masterpieces. I think that they're both, perfect, apart from if you're just going to nitpick, some things here and there. But I feel like Last of Us 2 is just a deeper dive, more thematically dense, a lot more controversial, of course, and a lot more of a love-hate type of video game. But that's how I see them in my mind, and I can't wait for this franchise to continue. I just hope that it doesn't take another decade for us to get the next one.
Yeah, I can't take any more.
We're gonna be living in that world if it doesn't it doesn't come out sooner. We're close enough.
We're actually going to be living in that world. And on that note, that's the end of our discussion. We hope that you enjoyed. We hope that you guys engage in conversation with us. If you absolutely abhor The Last of Us 2 and you hate it, feel free to jump in our mentions and excoriate us, flame us, argue with us. Obviously with love and respect. We love to talk back. So thank you very much for listening to this, and we'll bid you adieu. Guys, give the people your social media where they can find you and say goodbye to them. Christian.
Hey man, guys, I'm at Twitter and Instagram at the same place, at chart6363.
Nice. Brandon.
I'm at _meatball_84 on Twitter.
Nice. I have been yours truly, Lupe. You can find me on Twitter at LiveLoveLupe, and you can find me on the Vero social media app at LiveLoveLupe as well. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of the Game Exiles. And until next time, stay exiled.